Depression and where depression comes from, yeah, that is a big question in its own right. I'm just going to answer it the way I'm being given it, which surprises me, but this is what I'm being given. When a person gets into depression and really becomes taken over by it, then there's a very fundamental disappointment that's happened with them. And it's a disappointment to do with the fact that pretty much all of us human beings that live on this planet, we come from other places, and I really do mean other places outside of this third dimensional realm. Now, outside this third dimensional realm, we live in the realm of universal unconditional love. That's what it's like outside this planet, and all our needs are provided for. When we come onto planet Earth, we have to come to terms with some really harsh realities, and this happens to the child when the child gets old enough and the parents said, it's time for you to go and get a job. And a lot of young people are hit with a shock of horror when that first statement is made by the parent, because it's like, oh my goodness me, in order to survive on this third dimensional realm, I actually have to be on the treadmill of working just to find enough money to be able to feed myself, to warm myself up, to give myself some water to drink or some drinks, and a place to lay my head. My personal feeling about depression is it's much more likely to happen to the more sensitive souls who are in human form at this time, because they're going to have a distant memory, maybe even very fragmentary, of another form of existence where one didn't have to work or become into a state of semi-enslavement just to survive. And I think that for people who are sensitive, that's a really deep and savage blow to realise that it's a harsh world. It's a world on this planet where there's a great deal of things going on which are not fair, things like minimum wages, things like people doing really valuable work and getting paid a pittance, and there's someone doing a piece of work which has not got much intrinsic value and getting paid an absolute fortune. All the unfairness that you get on the planet can get to some people, particularly the more sensitive ones. They're much more likely to fall prey to depression because, hey, they want to manifest universal unconditional love, and a lot of their time they've been treated like shit. It's a very hard and bitter pill for some people to swallow, and so I feel that's got something of the cause or origin of serious depression, when you just feel how very unfair things are and you get into this point of hopelessness. I don't want to spend the rest of my life doing something which is really enslaving me and not what I came here to do. That's another big aspect of depression, when a person has not found their purpose in life. Imagine you're here, you've got a dim impression that it's something you came to do, but you've got no idea what it is, and you find yourself in a job which is enslaving you, and you're spending all the time just to keep going on the hamster wheel just to keep yourself alive, and the months go by and there's not a penny more in the bank account to show for it. These circumstances are going to be very naturally going to cause people to feel very depressed, a sense of hopelessness. So long as they don't have the connection with their purpose in life, I think that's going to be one of the fundamental causes of a person to get depression. I think that, well, my first observation is more sensitive people are likely to become depressed. Once that already sensitive person then enters into that state of depression, that then leaves them more sensitive and more delicate and more vulnerable still, because they don't have the confidence. One of the primary causes of depression is having a lack of confidence. That is going to make you much more vulnerable, and it could be vulnerable to such things as entities, or it could be vulnerable to such things as cults, when people literally get picked up off the street by so-called well-meaning people, and the next thing they know they're enslaved in a cult and they're being told what to do every hour of the day and night, and they've got no more freedom. And there are other cults out there in the world which do enslave people, so whether it's entities or cults, yes, I think if a person with depression is much more vulnerable. And then of course there's another aspect, which is people who, as we've already spoken about it, like to abuse others and inflict pain. I think a person suffering from depression is more vulnerable to all these conditions. One of the most difficult issues about depression, when a person feels really depressed, and I have experienced some black depression phases in my life, so I'm speaking from authority, it's not something that's just something that other people have been through. I've definitely been through it myself. My memory of when I've been in periods of black depression is I simply can't be bothered. And here you've got the biggest issue, which arises right from the start, because all the things that a person is most likely to benefit from, regrettably the person is most unlikely to want to do, because of the can't be bothered frame of mind. Can't be bothered tends to lead to stagnation, and stagnation is exactly the opposite of what they want. Now, some people have done some research on this, and they've discovered that if a person is suffering from depression, if the person is literally jollied along or chivied or in some way encouraged into some form of physical activity, there's an immediate improvement. So that's a difficult bit. So when a person reaches a certain point of depression, it gets to the point that there's no inner resources they can draw upon, and they really are pretty much waiting for something from the outside world to come in to their picture and to chivvy them along. And as soon as that happens, then things can start to improve. But when they're in that really black place, the idea of all the good things they can do, like going into nature, eating well, looking after themselves, drinking good quality water, breathing exercises, body work, all these things which we all know would help you, you're unfortunately least likely to be able to do. So it's one of these catch-22 situations in life, and it's something I don't feel I've got an answer for. My only experience for myself is that I found that if I went completely into a black depression, the more I thoroughly immersed myself in it, the quicker of duration was that black depression. And this did come from a very good friend of mine, and she suffered from something called hypomania, and she used to get into a black depression, and she did something which utterly blew me away. She said eventually, when she started to really make some progress, she realised that what she learned to do was to enjoy her depressions. So when she was feeling very depressed, she couldn't be bothered to do anything, she couldn't be bothered to move, she would just literally lie there in bed, motionless, incapable of doing anything except getting up to go to the toilet. That would be about the limit of all she'd be able to do. And this is what she did. She learned to completely surrender to that experience. And here's a bit I can't quite get my head around. She'd go even further than surrendering. She would actually derive some kind of enjoyment from that experience. And when she did that, that was what seemed to be able to shift around to it. And that's her experience. I go back to my own personal one, which is that I have certainly the memory that when I got into a black depression, if I got into being very, very static and just allowed myself to just go into complete immobility, I would be like that for actually only quite a short period of time. I really noticed it. It might only be for hours, days at the most, and then after usually just a matter of hours, then suddenly something would come into me and I'd feel like getting up and getting on with something again, and that was something that used to help for me. When it comes to substances and depression, this is a particularly significant issue. So the sort of things that I would say were definitely going to make things a lot worse for you would be consuming alcohol on a regular basis, because it simply shuts you down. In a state of depression, one is already a little bit too shut down anyway, so it's only going to magnify that. So one does it for the very short-term payoff of the inebriation, but the long-term drawback is pretty awful. Heroin and all those other chemicals, obviously a similar story, but probably even worse in terms of the way it affects a person. It's even harder to get out. And then there's another approach what some people use, which is to take the stimulating chemicals, chemical stimulants like amphetamines. They give the person a short-term energy boost and they feel like, yes, I can get on and do things. When of course what you get there is the long-term deterioration in all the physical systems of the body, and ultimately a deterioration of your spirit, because it just really grinds a person down after a certain length of time. So all these things are going to make things worse, and I'm sure it'll come as no surprise to those of you who know me well to say that I'm going to put my faith in what I always do, which is the plants. The plant kingdom is really where it's at. And so there are some really classical traditional herbal remedies for depression. An absolutely excellent one in my opinion is called St. John's wort. It's a pretty commonly occurring herb. You can go out and pick the plant at the right time of year. It doesn't cost you a penny, or you can go and order it from a herbalist. And once you start taking St. John's wort, the easiest way to take it is a tincture, so you can buy it from the herbal supplies as a tincture, literally adding a few drops into water, drinking that on a regular basis every day. If you do that, literally you want to do that for at least a few months. They recommend about 6 months is good to do that for St. John's wort. I have certainly cured examples of black depression in myself through working with St. John's wort. It's very, very effective. However, I go back to the catch-22 situation about depression, which is a difficult one, which is that when a person is in the pit of depression, they generally can't be bothered to do anything. So I just remember this very good friend of mine's advice: rather than being in the depression and fighting it and judging yourself and being negative to yourself and criticizing yourself about how depressed you feel, how about letting go of that completely and simply allowing yourself to immerse yourself in that experience? Because it seems that when we immerse ourselves in whatever feeling it is that's negative, we get through it quicker. Here's another thing to remember: any feeling that you're experiencing is not yours. You are not the owner of the feeling. That's not a helpful approach. A much more helpful approach is to simply realise It's a feeling which is something that's passing through you. It's like the water running down the brick there. If I was to dam the water up, the water would stagnate and stagnate until eventually the water would burst over the dam if the dam was not big enough. So that's rather like the same thing with depression. If you can actually immerse yourself in whatever feelings you're having, if you feel completely hopeless and useless and whatever, if you just completely immerse yourself in those feelings, that allows the feelings to pass through quicker, like the water running through the brook as you can hear it. That seems to be something that's generally recognised to be very, very helpful. Challenging to do. So it means you're letting go of the usual way of behaving, which is to judge and criticise and condemn yourself while doing so. My experience is if you're in depression and you're criticising yourself and giving yourself a hard time, it's only going to make the depression last for longer. If you can surrender to it, this seems to be one of the clues about human life again. The process of actively surrendering to it means these are no longer your feelings, you're not attached to them, they're flowing through you and they're gone, and then you can literally pick yourself up, open your eyes and go about the next part of your day. Well, to me the most important part of the Universal Soul Retrieval with regard to the whole subject of the dark side and depression is the very first part of the process, and I think of the first two parts to be more accurate. The first one is the negative energy release, entity release, demon release, whatever you want to call it. It's getting these entrenched negative energies which we recognise as shamans actually don't even want to be on this third dimension. They never wanted to be here in the first place, so therefore we've got a worldwide problem. So with the negative energy release, I would say that's perhaps the biggest thing of all. Once we've released these negative energies and we've literally given them the love to rise up through the vortex and to go into their heaven, that's the biggest thing. You're no longer carrying that massive weight around with you, when you're no longer having these thoughts in your head which are suggesting for you to continue to be in your dark spiral. That's all gone. Next step, curse removal. As soon as we've got the curse removal situation underway, and I'm delighted to say this is a process which is so quick when the Universal Soul Retrieval is actually operating, it's such a very fast process, and as soon as those curses start to break down, which is done through the active will of the shaman, the active will of the shaman causes the curses to literally break down from sentences into words, from words into letters, from letters into mist. Again, the blue vortex sucks them up, so that means that the dead weight of other people's words is no longer dragging on you like the ball and chain from the old picture of the conflict. That's gone. That takes us to the third part of the process, which is specifically targeted at the dark side, and that's the karma release, the universal karma release, where what we do is we're able to perform the miracle of, rather than doing a single piece of work for you and one relationship and dealing with that little relationship cord, clearing it, healing it and allowing the negativity to release. No, we're doing it in all relationships, in all lifetimes, all at the same time, through the miraculous technologies of the helpers. If it wasn't for them, this wouldn't be an offer. When that process is up and running and is completed, it means to say that no longer are you being bogged down with the dead weight of relationship difficulties, which is one of the primary things that we're all aware of that makes our life difficult. We have a bad row with someone and then we know we're going to meet them the following day and we have all this trepidation of what's it going to be like, are they going to remember everything I said yesterday? You know what it's like, you've been there, I've been there, we've all been there. With the karma release, you know that when you meet that person for the next occasion, you started from a clean slate. If you want to, you can allow a habit to take you into the same place and you can end up feeling just as miserable with each other, but at least you're not having that dead weight which is dragging at your heels. It's gone. It's up to you now, and if you let go of the old habits and remember before you see them, I know what I'll do. I'll just beam a load of love into that person's general direction for 5 minutes before I meet them. You can imagine how all these simple things make all the difference in the world. It's a free will universe, it's a free choice universe. That means that if there's a person that you know and their free choice is to thoroughly explore the dark side, then recognise they're doing that on behalf of the whole human race. And in fact, what I'd ask you to do is quietly just give them a gold star, because they're doing something horrifically difficult. They're going to be getting all sorts of pretty awful paybacks for the negativity which they're unleashing upon themselves and upon other people, and that's their personal journey. That's something they needed to experience for themselves, because we all come from these other realms where unconditional universal love is everywhere. Obviously that's why it's called universe. We come to this particular place, this wonderful, beautiful planet, which has got such beauty and such ugliness on the same planet. We've got such destruction in the environment on the one hand, on the other hand we've got such environmental vibrance and life on the other. For those people that choose that path, we recognise that they're adding to the diversity of the human race. They're getting their own learning in their own way, and they're also providing learning to other people too. Because if I have a person that gives me a hard time and I experience a lot of lack of love from that person, that only gives me the sense of appreciating the love that I do have in my life even more. And it gives me the desire to love myself even more if somebody else is giving me a lot of hatred. So in that sense it's only benefiting me, and in the long term it's benefiting them too. In the short term it's creating a lot of cyclical situations for them which are making their life more and more difficult, for sure. But in the long term picture it's all part of the human diversity, which is what we're here to celebrate as the human race. And so to bring things to the conclusion, I think the first thing we need to do is to literally celebrate the existence of the dark side in the world, because it's part of what's making us become fully awakened, fully realised human beings. When we have our full human template activated, we become able to do all the things that we used to be able to do a long time ago as original human beings. So it's a very exciting time we're living. We can recognise that the dark side is part of life, and we can do something very personal, which we can take this personal choice of, okay, I used to be, it's back to the power of the word. I remember bringing this one in a long time ago in the film, which is, if you bring this wonderful phrase of I used to be a violent person, I used to be a hostile person, I used to be disrespectful to people, I used to be inconsiderate, I used to be selfish, I used to be arrogant. When you put the used to in that sentence, then you're acknowledging that's in the past, which is great, because then you can say, I recreate myself to be who I am now in the present, and from the present I can move forward moment to moment, and by moving forward moment to moment I'm creating my future. And any time I do slip from my standards I'm setting myself, I can take myself off to one side, I can make goodbye apology, I can clear the air, and I can go forward. And this is what we can all do. We can all go forward into manifesting more and more love, because it's 2012. Manifest the love, enjoy your life, and enjoy what comes your way, whatever it may be. Thank you. Is it running?
Yeah.
Great. Okay. I want to take this opportunity to make it really clear to everyone out there who's been watching all these films over the last 45 years that I have nothing but gratitude to Dan, who is my partner in all this work that we've been doing in terms of the films and in terms of taking the Universal Soul Retrieval out to the world at large. And I want you all to know that he's the very first person to receive one, and had it not been for his unconditional enthusiasm, I might never be sitting in front of this camera today. So thank you, Dan, and thank you for all of you watching.
Okay.
I've waited a long time to say that, and they tell me I've got to say it now.